There are days when the world feels like it's folding in on itself. When silence is no longer peace, but pressure. When time drips like acid, slow and corrosive. You lie awake with questions clawing at the ceiling of your mind. Why do I feel so fragile? Why does the smallest failure feel like a collapse? Why do I bend to fear, to shame, to doubt? We live in a time where minds break more often than bones, where comfort is king and struggle is villainized. But maybe, just maybe, the antidote to this slow erosion of the soul isn't found in avoiding suffering, but in confronting it head-on, in embracing it, in becoming something because of it. Friedrich Nietzsche, the firebrand philosopher who walked the tightrope between genius and madness, didn't offer us comfort. He didn't whisper sweet affirmations. He didn't believe in protecting you from the storm. He believed in throwing you into it and teaching you how to walk through lightning. He once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." In those few words, he revealed a truth we've spent centuries trying to escape. Your strength, your unbreakable mind isn't forged in peace. It's born in chaos. Nietzsche's vision of the human spirit wasn't tame. It wasn't neat. It was volcanic, violent, raw, alive. He dared us to imagine a self not preserved, but transformed. Not comforted, but challenged. He knew that the most dangerous prison is the one lined with velvet cushions. That a life without adversity is a life without depth. So what does it mean to craft an unbreakable mind? It begins with one of his most often quoted and most often misunderstood phrases. "What does not kill me makes me stronger." These are not the words of a man trying to motivate you. They are the words of a man who had stared down the void, suffered devastating illness, rejection, isolation, and refused to let it shatter him. To Nietzsche, pain was not a detour, it was the path. Suffering wasn't a sign that something had gone wrong. It was evidence that something was happening. Growth, evolution, fire refining metal. But this strength he spoke of is not brute resistance. It's not about locking your emotions in a vault and pretending to be invincible. It's about integration. It's about allowing the darkness to shape you without owning you. It's understanding that the blade becomes sharp only because it's been through the grindstone. And behind that fire is the will to power. Not the thirst for domination over others. Nietzsche's idea has been distorted and weaponized by those who misunderstood him, but the power to overcome yourself. The internal war. The quiet battle between who you are and who you could be. The will to power is the choice to rise every time your mind says stay down. It's the force that compels the seed to split its own shell to reach the sun. It is not a scream. It is a quiet, relentless yes to the hard things. But how do you harness that will when everything in your life tells you to be small, to be safe? When you are surrounded by a culture that rewards the path of least resistance, that tells you healing should be gentle, that growth should be painless, you start by becoming who you are. Nietzsche believed that most people live as copies, imitations, shadows of what the world told them to be. He called us to something terrifying: authenticity. Not in the watered-down modern sense, but in the ancient, brutal act of forging identity from within. Stripping away what has been imposed upon you, the beliefs, the habits, the roles, and standing naked in front of your soul, asking, "Who am I?" when nothing is left to prove. This isn't a poetic exercise, it's a psychological crucifixion, because to truly become who you are, you must kill who you've pretended to be. You must bury the version of yourself that made peace with mediocrity. You must risk being misunderstood, isolated, even hated for the sake of becoming real. But the journey doesn't end there. Once you begin to walk your own path, you will face moments so bitter, so devastating, you will be tempted to turn back. That is where Nietzsche offers us one of his most profound principles. Amor fati, the love of fate. Not acceptance, not tolerance. Love. Imagine looking at your greatest heartbreak, your deepest regret, the ugliest scars you hide even from yourself, and saying, "This, too, is mine. This, too, made me." Amor fati is not romanticizing pain, it is rising above it. It's realizing that if you erase the suffering, you erase the strength it gave you. That to curse your past is to weaken your future, and so you do something radical. You embrace every moment, as if it were chosen by you, for you. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start saying, "This happened for me to become who I am becoming." But loving fate, truly loving it, not just nodding at the idea but bowing to it, requires a brutal kind of courage. Because fate doesn't always come wrapped in wisdom. Sometimes it arrives as betrayal, as illness, as a silence so thick it chokes every prayer you've ever whispered. Nietzsche didn't ask us to admire these moments. He asked us to own them, to stand before the storm, drenched and broken, and say, "This too is part of my becoming." And that leads us to a thought experiment so violent in its honesty that most turn away from it: eternal recurrence. Nietzsche asked us to imagine this, that every single moment of your life, down to the smallest breath and cruelest heartbreak, would repeat again and again, infinitely. Would you cry out in horror, or would you embrace it? This is not a riddle, it's a mirror. If you recoil at the thought of living your life again, it's because something inside you knows you are not living truthfully. The eternal recurrence isn't a metaphysical claim, it's a moral reckoning. If your choices were eternal, would you still make them? If your pain would return forever, could you still say yes to your life? It strips away the illusion of someday. It forces you to confront the now, to act as though your existence matters so much that you would be willing to live it again, not in spite of its pain, but because of its intensity. An unbreakable mind doesn't escape this weight, it carries it, proudly. But to walk this path, you must do something most are unwilling to do, separate from the herd. Nietzsche's contempt for the herd mentality wasn't born of elitism, it was born from tragedy. He watched the human spirit shrink under the weight of collective conformity, people abandoning their own thoughts to echo someone else's. He believed the crowd was the graveyard of the self. And so he warned us, if you want to be unbreakable, you must be willing to stand alone. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or antisocial. It means refusing to dilute your convictions for comfort. It means questioning every should until you find your own must. Because when everyone thinks the same, no one is thinking. And if your values were handed to you, not chosen by you, then your strength belongs to someone else. That's why Nietzsche called for the revaluation of all values. To throw everything, your morality, your beliefs, your purpose, into the fire and see what survives. Not as an act of rebellion, but of creation. Because to build an unbreakable mind, you must first destroy the illusions that made you weak. This is where most turn back. Right here. Because it's one thing to challenge the world, it's another to challenge yourself. But Nietzsche knew, no one else can build your truth. No one else can give your life meaning. The moment you wait for permission is the moment you abandon your potential. So you begin again. Not as a follower, not as a reflection, but as a creator. You start crafting your own values forged from pain, tempered by reflection. Not because you're above morality, but because you understand that borrowed morality is a cage. That virtue without questioning is obedience, and obedience is not strength, it's surrender. This is the soil from which Nietzsche's most feared and misunderstood idea grows. The Übermensch, the overman, not a tyrant, not a god, but a human who has risen above the smallness of compromise. The overman is the one who no longer lives in reaction to the world but in creation of it. A person who does not shrink from chaos but dances with it, who doesn't deny the void but laughs into it. This figure is not a fantasy. It is a target, an aspiration, a mirror of what we could be if we dared to evolve beyond survival and into sovereignty. To become this, you must abandon the idea that life owes you ease. You must stop hiding behind the illusion that you are broken, waiting to be fixed by something external. You are not a machine to be repaired, you are a forge, meant to burn and shape and rise. But even as you rise, even as you carve your own path and silence the noise of the herd, there will be nights-long, hollow nights when it will all feel meaningless. When the weight of being awake in a sleeping world feels too much. When nihilism presses its cold hand against your chest, this is where many fall. But this is also where the unbreakable are born. Because Nietzsche did not preach despair. He walked through it. And he came out the other side not with answers, but with defiance. With life affirmation. With a burning conviction that even if life has no inherent meaning, we can create it. That even in a godless universe, we are not abandoned, we are free. Free to affirm life, in its blood and its beauty, in its terror and its tenderness. Not to escape it with fantasy, not to numb it with distraction, but to live it, all of it, eyes wide open, heart exposed, spine unbending. To affirm life is to look at its raw, unfiltered face, to see the chaos, the loss, the absurdity, and still whisper, yes. It is the ultimate rebellion in a world addicted to comfort and numbness. It is the resurrection of the human spirit, not through salvation, but through self-overcoming. Nietzsche didn't offer a map. He handed you a mirror and said, break it, and then build yourself from the shards. He knew that to be truly unbreakable is not to be untouched by pain, but to be shaped by it, without becoming its slave. It is to carry your scars not as wounds, but as insignias, proof that you descended into your private hell and came back bearing fire. This strength isn't loud. It doesn't posture. It doesn't need applause. The unbreakable mind walks through a burning world with open eyes and a steady gait, choosing creation over complaint, responsibility over resentment, purpose over paralysis. And so now, the question isn't what Nietzsche believed. The question is what you will choose. Will you keep waiting for life to soften so you don't have to harden? Or will you choose to become steel in the flame? Will you run from the void? Or will you build a ladder into its depths and plant a flag at the bottom? Will you conform to comfort? Or will you dare fully, wildly, dangerously to become who you are? Because the mind you seek, the unbreakable fortress you long to inhabit, it will not be gifted. It must be crafted. Not in a weekend, not in a book, but in the battlefield of your own becoming. Brick by brutal brick. So rise not because it is easy, but because it is the only thing worth doing. And when the world asks why you walk through fire with a grin, tell them, I am not here to be saved, I am here to become.